Shalom. I am Rabbi Joshua Caruso from Anshe Chesed Fairmount Temple. I'm honored today to walk with Edith's family through this difficult period of time as we move from the funeral home to the graveside and then continue on with a new chapter of our life with Edith not in it, but the memories forever sustained. In the words of Ecclesiastes, a season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven, a time for dancing, a time for wailing, a time for birthing, a time for dying, a time for speaking, a time for silence, a time for seeking, a time for losing. The time of mourning is a complicated time filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Edith's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. I invite you now to join with me in the recitation of Psalm 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Eshet Chayil, Eshet Chayil miyimsa. What a precious find is this woman of valor, Edith Orlean. Her worth was far beyond rubies. Her husband, Art, put his confidence in her and lacked no good thing. She was good to him, never bad all the days of her life. She opened her hand to the needy and extended it to the poor. She was clothed with strength and splendor. She looked to the future cheerfully. She opened her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue was guided by kindness. She oversaw the activities of her household, that they never ate the bread of idleness. Her children now come forward. David, Debbie, and Susan. They bless her. Her husband, Zichrono Livracha, may he forever be a blessing, would have said, many women have done superbly, but Edith surpassed them all. Charm is deceitful, beauty vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. We extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. There is a very famous phrase in this week's Torah portion, Terumah. Vasuli mikdash v'shochanti betocham. Make for me a sanctuary, God says, and I will dwell in it. But this verse is often understood to mean that if one simply builds an edifice, a physical space for God, then automatically God will fill that space. But the true translation is, build me a sanctuary so I can dwell with them, so I can dwell with the people. That without people, without community, God cannot exist. It's not enough to devote a physical space or place for God, because God does not dwell in zip codes. God dwells where there are people, where there is community. And sometimes a person can be a sanctuary too. And sometimes it is what they create that provides a sanctuary for others. It is in this vein that we think about Edith, creator of things, of foods, of clothing, of memories. They all served as a sanctuary. All served as a sanctuary for her family and her friends, the wide community in which she engaged. She was a sanctuary. And so today, we think about those who carry on her memories, carry on her legacy, and have some messages to share. So we'd like to first invite David and then Susan to share, and then her grandson Cameron will speak on behalf of the grandchildren.
Thank you, Rabbi Caruso. Thank you for your kind words and comforting words. And thank you also for taking the time to spend with us yesterday, to talk to us, to learn more about my mother, what her life was like, and what she meant to us. It was a very worthwhile process. And I even learned things about her that I had not known. Thanks to all of you for being here today. It's such a great feeling to have the support and friendship of all of you, and to know how much me and my family mean to you. And thanks for everyone expressing their sympathy and support through this. When I reflect back on my mother's life, I think of someone who lived through one of the most turbulent times in American and Jewish history, to then participate in the American dream and give her family, her children, a wonderful life. That experience made her appreciative of life. It also made her, as many of you know, a very feisty individual. She was born in Hungary in 1923, not that long before the Great Depression. She immigrated to the United States, but only after spending several years in Mexico, where her father worked for a large corporation. She was fortunate enough to move to the United States before World War II and the horrors of Nazi Germany. Still, several family members who remained behind perished at the hands of the Nazis. And although I did not know it before, Susie related that to me, that when she went with my mom to Hungary on a trip of rediscovering her roots, she learned at that time that that had been the fate of some of our family members. In her American life, she became a suburban housewife and homemaker, but was never content with just that life. Even when all her children were fairly young, she began working at a number of local banks, Shaker Savings, Ohio Savings, Euclid National Bank, over the years. That was part of her background. Her father had been an accountant. She belonged to charitable and social organizations. She knitted, baked, and cooked. She played tennis. She played the piano. She sewed. She always kept busy. And she had very high expectations for her children. She allowed me or shall I say, made me, go to the art museum as a young kid to learn how to draw and paint and so on. I think that's part of why I still can't go back there very readily. She even induced me to take tap dancing lessons. And the way that she accomplished that was to tell me that boxers needed to be light on their feet, and that's why they became tap dancers. The only part that I never figured out, I never had any interest in becoming a boxer. She raised us with very high expectations, and though she didn't always admit it, I think we did meet and even exceed some of those expectations. Not as a tap dancer, though. The last few months of my mother's life were very challenging. Her health and quality of life had diminished significantly. Under those circumstances, it was so wonderful and uplifting to experience the loving care that she received at Hillcrest Hospital and especially at the Wiles, where she lived the last several years. I'm involved with Montefiore and the Wiles from a standpoint of board involvement. We talk about whether the census is 246 or 247, and whether the MDS scores are a certain number and the Medicaid rate is something. But when you get down to it, it all relates to the caregivers and the people who work there and how they treat the people who are there under their care. I can't thank the staff at the Wiles enough for everything that they did, for how much they truly cared for my mom, and for the concern and support they showed us at the most unfortunate and unhappy of times. The difficulty of watching my mother in her final days, hours, and breaths was so greatly relieved by their support. Mom, may you rest in peace. Thanks for all that you did for us. We will never forget.
Before I begin, I just want to complain about one thing. Can't believe my mom left this earth without giving me the recipe for her pecan tarts. Mom, I will never forgive you for that. My mom was a person of great contradiction. She was incredibly ladylike, but she was also a really dedicated, happy-to-sweat athlete. She loved beautiful things, but like so many people of her generation who grew up in the middle of the Depression, she was never ashamed to clip a coupon or reuse wrapping paper. She was an old-fashioned housewife, and yet she started working when I was 5 years old and was really proud of that. She wanted nothing more than for me to get married and have children as soon as possible, and yet she was the greatest champion of my career and reveled in my achievements and encouraged me always to strive for my goals. My mom, as David said, was born in Hungary, but left when she was very young and had never been back. So some years ago, I came up with the idea that we should go there together and visit her hometown and visit her first cousin, whom she had never met. It was an epic trip, and when I think back and miss my mom as much as I do today, I really savor the fact that we did that trip together. And there are two memories that I want to share with you today about that trip that I feel really capture the essence of my mom. She was born not in Budapest, but in a small city in eastern Hungary. So on our trip, we flew first to Budapest and did tourist things there, and then rented a car and headed out to Sátoraljaújhely, her birthplace. When we were about 4 miles outside of town, driving down a beautiful tree-lined road, she suddenly asked me to pull over. She had a look on her face combining excitement and anxiety and just about every possible emotion. She was all choked up, and she said in a tiny voice, "I'm so nervous." It just lasted for a moment, but I never forget the feeling that we were diving in together to her childhood and her memories and her identity. I could see why she was nervous. I was nervous too, even though I had no reason to be. It was just a profound moment to share with her. We drove into town and somehow managed to find her family's home where she was born. And then she said what we all say when we confront a monument of our childhood. "It looks so small." Now let me tell you a little more about this trip. I had made all the arrangements. This was fairly early in the post-Soviet years in Hungary, and it wasn't yet a popular tourist destination. I managed to find a Hungarian travel agent, but as the trip unfolded, it began to dawn on me that this travel agent was a total crook. Everything she had booked for us was not as advertised, and far worse. In any case, she had booked us a hotel in Sátoraljaújhely. We had been in touch with my mom's cousin, but of course we'd never met him or his family, so we just planned to stay in a hotel in town, get together with them, and make their acquaintance. So after we left Budapest, we drove to the town and began looking for our hotel. We circled several times because there was nothing fitting the description of this lovely country inn the travel agent had promised us. The address we had was slapped on the front of a tumble-down building on a rough-looking side street. More circling, more looking for the address, because we could not believe this was our hotel. Finally, we pulled up in front of it and walked inside. It was almost pitch dark. We could make out a few pool tables and a long bar and about a half dozen greasy-looking young men who stared at us as we walked by. We eventually found someone, a weary-looking woman with a broken front tooth and a bad attitude, who seemed to be in charge. She grunted in acknowledgement when we said we had a reservation, dug around in a pocket and handed us a key, then trudged up the back stairs. I should mention that my mom did not travel light. She packed complete outfits for each day, with matching shoes, matching handbags. I was in charge of carrying her Volkswagen-sized suitcase throughout the trip. So I humped up the stairs with her suitcase in mind, following the snaggletooth woman to our room. I would say the room was only slightly bigger than my mother's suitcase. The bed was a wooden pallet a few inches from the floor. The towels we were given were 2 threadbare washcloths. The curtain was a tattered piece of muslin hanging by 1 curtain ring. In my memory, there were bullet holes in the door, but I think I'm making that up. As we surveyed the room, we heard beer bottles breaking down in the bar. I turned to my mom and I said, "We have got to get out of here." Now, I've traveled a lot, and not always in the most glamorous fashion, but this was easily the scariest place I'd ever found myself. But my mom, in her inimitable, optimistic fashion, said, "Oh, Susie, it's not so bad. We'll just tidy up a little bit." Talk about turning the tables. Here was Edith Orlean, member of Beachmont Country Club, maven of Shaker Heights, A woman who wore gloves when she went to downtown Cleveland, refused to wear pants on airplanes because it wasn't polite, talking me into staying in a dive bar back room that might have been used most of the time for God knows what. I've never been more impressed by my mother's grit. And after that moment passed, we started laughing about the situation, waving our little ratty washcloths and wondering where on earth we were. The story has one more turn. Once we settled into our room, trying to ignore the breaking beer bottle and the fist fight that had broken out downstairs, we called our cousins and invited them over. Now, I'm sure they were expecting us as Americans to be affluent, sophisticated. And as they confided to us later, they were absolutely baffled when we called and told them we were staying in the town's most notorious dive bar and brothel. When they arrived, they embraced us as if they'd known us forever, and it was clear immediately we were family. At dinner, they begged us to move out of the hotel and stay with them. My mom insisted we were just fine. To be honest, I'm glad she was so steadfast, because we went back to that dump and laughed all night and enjoyed being on this adventure together. Now, in the interest of full disclosure, I will tell you that the next morning we packed up and got out of there so fast we must have burned a hole in the carpet. And we spent the rest of the week staying with my cousins, forming a closeness that remains to this day. When I think about my mom, I think of this example. I'll miss her.
I just want to say it's very unfair for me to go after my dad and Susie. Bear with me. First and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone for being here today. It is a true testament to the wonderful person my Grandma Edie is and was, and the love and support means a lot to our family at this time. I wanted to speak today on behalf of Edie's 6 grandchildren, Ashley, Carrie, Jesse, Catrielle, Austin, and myself, because Edie had such a meaningful impact on all our lives, and she was such an important person to me. I was awfully lucky because for about 10 years, I was an only grandchild. Being an only grandchild meant lots of attention and also led to being majorly spoiled by my grandparents. More importantly, though, it meant that I got to spend a substantial amount of time getting to know my grandparents and learning so many important life lessons from both of them. I remember going over my grandparents' house every Friday after school and getting to spend a few hours with my grandma before my grandpa and dad would come home from work. These are really special memories for me because I got to spend a lot of time with my grandma, one-on-one. In these moments, I learned a lot about the importance of family, and Edie always taught me about manners and etiquette and how to be a polite and respectful young man. We would listen to classical music, usually a famous pianist like Gershwin, and I would help Edie prepare the Friday night feast. I attribute cooking with my grandma as a major reason of why I still love to cook to this day. I was talking to my brother Carrie, and we were talking and reminisced about those Friday night dinners like it was just last week. We remember her making boiled artichokes, chicken noodle soup, bone marrow, spinach and artichoke dips, rack of lamb, and of course our favorite course, a special dessert like pecan tarts, lemon bars, or her famous rum cake. By the way, I don't think it's a coincidence that the amount of rum in Edie's rum cake seemed to increase with her age. To all of us grandchildren, Edie was an amazing role model. being an incredible grandmother, a homemaker, a fabulous tennis player, and she was very active in the community. She taught us about saving up for our futures, purchasing bonds for our birthdays and other special occasions. But she also taught us about giving back to those less fortunate through charitable giving and giving of her time. I was talking to my brother Jesse, and he was telling me that his favorite memory was when Edie came into his school for Grandparents' Day in 3rd grade. He said that she cooked special Hungarian delicacies for his class, and everyone loved her food the best. No surprise. Jesse told me it was a special memory he shared with her that he will never forget. Catrielle was telling me that she remembers Edie giving her a bunch of stuffed animals, which meant a lot to her. And it's a reminder of Edie to her, and a great memory the two shared together. The younger grandchildren, Austin, Catrielle, and Jesse, were so special to Edie. And anytime Catrielle or Jesse would visit, or Austin would come into town to see his grandma, she would light up when they came into the room. She was so happy to have so many grandchildren. I know we were all so special to her. Another special thing about my relationship with my grandma is that Edie and I would always find ourselves on special afternoon adventures. She would take me to different museums, plays, or to see the orchestra. And after a little culture, we would always finish the day by enjoying some of her favorite Spumoni ice cream or a Dr. Pepper ice cream float. Shopping with Edie was a lot of fun too. She would often take me to the mall to buy a new pair of shoes. And I do have to note that she bought me my first pair of LeBrons, and I blame her for my expensive taste and vast Nike collection. We also would scour the mall searching for the newest Beanie Baby, as her and I had quite our own collections, and we would compete. And Ashley shared with me a special memory she has of Edie and told me about a gift of a soft stuffed platypus Beanie Baby that Edie gave her in the 4th grade, which she calls Sippy. Ashley said she fell in love with it and brought it everywhere she went. She says it is so special to her that she still sleeps with it every night, and it makes her think of Edie. She said the best part about it is that it made Edie so happy, giving Ashley something that she loves so much. And I wanted to share this memory because I thought this was just another example of how selfless and caring Edie was towards her family. My grandma's never-ending confidence in my abilities always meant the world to me. She used to ask me if I was going to go to law school like my grandpa Art and if I was going to follow in his footsteps. But the reality of the situation is that both my grandpa and my grandma have set such an amazing example and high standard to live life by. As I look around the room, I see so many friends and family members, and that is because my grandma was such a special person and touched so many people's lives. I intend to live every day in my Grandma Edie and Grandpa Art's honor, and hope to one day create my own family that is as special as the one my grandparents have created. Edie, I thank you for everything you have done for me and for always being my biggest cheerleader. I love you.
Beautiful, Cameron. It's quite a privilege. One of the benefits of being at Fairmount Temple for a number of years now is that I remember Cameron and Ashley and Carrie and Dylan, just all of them as kids and as students, and still finding themselves and being able to see the later kids come around too, and seeing what beautiful grown-ups they've become. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. That was Edith, a living sanctuary for so many. For Arthur, too. She was in her mid-20s when she met Arthur. They got married relatively late for that time period, 25, 26, 27. The story goes that the two met while playing tennis at Kane Park. Edith truly fell for Art that day. She mentioned she actually fell, but she fell for him too. And it's summarily believed that his red hair, eerily similar to her dad's, was what truly drew her in. And Art was a sanctuary for Edith too. Always supportive, loving. It was a working partnership. Their marriage included many Saturday nights out and about, sometimes at Beechwood, sometimes at the Playhouse or at the Symphony, going out with other couples, enjoying the fellowship of a wide circle of friends. And yes, to Susan, Edith was a protective lioness, proud of her, championing her efforts. And as Susan shared, she really supported her. Even in the smallest writing gigs, it was as if she was contracted by the New York Times to write a column for them. And Cleveland provided a rootedness for Susan, always coming back to see Mom, always remembering where her life took hold. And to Debbie, she shared a few words she asked me to share with you. It's really hard to say goodbye. Seems the time has really flown by. Debbie writes, you tell me about your garden and the beautiful sweet peas and nasturtiums and your favorites, the pansies. You never grew tired of working in the soil and tending to your lovely garden. I miss all the great food you'd cook for us when we'd come to visit, never failing to have your hazelnut tort or pecan tarts or madeleines and our favorites like chopped liver or any of a number of special entrees that you were an expert in cooking. You loved to have special gifts when we'd visit, evidence of your constant thoughtfulness and generosity. I remember when you knit Dave a sweater, and I thought that was so special, not to mention all the sweaters you knitted for all of us and your grandchildren. It says a lot about you, Mom, always thinking about others, doing such nice things for everyone all the time. Writing sweet thank you notes to people and buying cards to send to your friends. And I thank you for instilling that in us, because it is a wonderful trait to uphold, and I'm proud that you stressed how important that was, writing notes. You were so proud of all your children and grandchildren, keeping photo albums with special accomplishments and honors. That was really inspiring and complimentary to all of us. Tonight the stars are twinkling up in the beautiful sky and singing your praises and saying goodbye. So now as you take your cruise into another realm, my thoughts are with you and I will miss you forever and a day. And as David had shared, she certainly displayed her usual spunk, pushing him that little bit harder, and perhaps David's success in part is owed to Edith and Art's strident ways. And yet there is another story, the one about David and a little 2-year-old named Cameron. This is the story of a dad who needed to feel rooted again in family and unconditional love. It was Edie who made sure to create that sanctuary for them. And as Cam shared, those moments were so special. They remain true and are captured forever in his heart. Yes, he remembers when she would pick him up from school on those Fridays and those times just cooking and preparing for those Friday night dinners, those Shabbat meals. To her last breath, Cam felt that special connection with his grandmother. Indeed, she felt a special connection with everyone. Even Cam's fiancée, Dana, remembers walking around the house and seeing the beautiful pictures of her family, pure evidence that how much she loved them. Yes, she loved them all, Cameron and Ashley, Carrie, Jesse, Catrielle, and Austin. After sending a letter to Edith and Art, this was a while back, maybe 2003, wishing them Mazel Tov on the occasion of the birth of Austin. Does that sound right? Edith wrote, a letter. We are especially pleased, she shared this with the clergy, we are especially pleased as this is the first child for our youngest daughter, Susan, who is a career lady, but is fast becoming a competent mom and loving every minute of it. Besides which we now have another redhead in the Orlean family, and those are the best kind. She continued, thank you for your lovely blessings and hopes that our little Austin will be a source of pride and joy to our family, quoting what we had shared with her, and she wrote back, of course he will. She loved tennis, was a passionate player, even winning a seniors tournament just 15 years ago. Stephanie remembers her friends thinking how good she really was. She played tennis with friends and with David too. David remembers there was a time when David was younger that their skills matched up just right. Her wearing David's letter sweater from school. And Edith created a sanctuary at home. She was a consummate balabusta, cooking and baking wonderful treats from scratch that the family treasured. Yes, so many of them have been mentioned already. She took pride in this work, considered it a sacred duty. She knit those sweaters and was incredibly accomplished at doing so. She enjoyed gardening, stamp and coin collecting. She played piano. And Fairmount Temple was a sanctuary for Edith too. She was involved with the sisterhood, now the Women of Fairmount Temple. Was a proud member. She once wrote on a membership form that going to sisterhood enriches my life in many ways by the excellent programs that we enjoy. A card she sent conveyed her appreciation for when she was called up for a milestone birthday. After the service, I remember I came up to her and asked about Cameron. This was a while back. She wrote in this letter to us, Cam has always enjoyed Temple just like his dad, David. I don't know, Cam. Maybe she's putting a little polish on that, but I'll take it. He enjoyed Temple just like his dad, David, who was encouraged by Rabbi Lelyveld to attend rabbinical school because he thought he had an aptitude for it. This is news to me, David. We'll have to talk. The enclosed check is an appreciation for mentioning my mother's name, she writes, for Yahrzeit. It reminded me so much of how I miss her. The Oneg Shabbat was lovely, and the entire evening made me glow. What a treat for clergy to receive letters like that. Edith, however, did not shrink from speaking her mind when something bothered her, too. She once wrote, during High Holy Days in the past years, I have been disturbed and amazed at the amount of talking that some people do and the rudeness in not paying attention. I say, amen, Edith. Thank you. And thank you, Edie, Grandma, for reminding us that you have been a sanctuary to so many, including your beautiful sister Eleanor, who sits here today, remembers her so fondly. You had shared with me how close you were as kids, how close you continued to be. Thank you, Edie, for reminding us that sanctuary can be found in many different forms. For her friends and family, she provided a sanctuary, and we are grateful for her time on this earth, the gifts she brought. Thank you for the lessons, Edie. Thank you for reminding us that we can all be a vessel of God, a sanctuary to others. Lord, prepare me. Lord, prepare us to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, we'll be a living sanctuary for you. Amen. Let us pause for a moment as we think about Edie's life and the gift she brought to each one of us. Please rise for the chanting of El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamsei Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Bemalot Kerushim Utorim, Gezor Rakia Mazirim, Et Nishmat Gidl bat Irene Veluis Shalcha Leholama, Began Eden Tehei Menuchata, Ana Balarachamim, Hastireha, Beseter Knafecha Leholamim, Utzror Bitzror Achayim Et Nishmata, Adonai Unachalata, Vetanuach Beshalom Al Mishkava, Venomar Amen. El Malei Rachamim, exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, to the soul of Edith Orlean, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. As we turn to the conclusion of our service, I'd like to mention that immediately following this service, we will move to Mount Olive Cemetery for the burial. And then following the burial, family will receive friends at Beachmont Country Club, 29600 Chagrin Boulevard in Orange. Shiva will be immediately following the graveside interment, and it will continue through 8 p.m. tonight. I also share today that Edith is survived by her son David, his wife Stephanie, his daughter Susan, daughter and son-in-law John, daughter Debbie and Dave, grandchildren Cameron, Ashley, Carrie, Jesse, Catrielle, Austin, and of course her sister Eleanor Leipitz. Zichrono livracha. May her memory forever be a blessing.